that live stream and get Father Brian a really difficult question. See if you can just stump the guy.
Just get the kindergartners to ask, because they're the ones that ask the hard questions.
Yeah, they do.
So you got to lower the answer to their level. And she's like, I don't know how to answer this philosophy question to a 5-year-old.
Absolutely.
All right. Who made God? That's been the most common question. It's like, well,
guys, nobody. Let's dig into that.
Yeah.
All right. We thank you guys for listening. You are listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Spring Care-a-thon. Come follow me. We're going to start here with a question. And so if you know how this works, you call in to 785-621-4110 with your question. You can also donate at that same number. And if you get the question right, we'll put you in a drawing for that $50 gift certificate to Messenger Traditional Catholic Books and Gifts here in Hayes. I'm going to read the question and then thank some people as I do that. All right, here we go. First question of the hour is, what year did the Salina Diocese receive Bishop Vinke as our bishop? Was it A, 2020, B, 2021, C, 2016, or D, 2018? What year did the Salina Diocese receive Bishop Vinke as our bishop? 2020, 2021, 2016, or 2018? 785-621-4110. And I also want to thank Howard Garvert from Plainville, just gave $250, which means with our matching funds, that became $500. And Mary Joka from Salina gave $50. So look, we're starting to get people once again from all of our listening areas. Thank you, Howard and Mary, for your donations. And thank you for our donors who gave those matching funds, who now to help us to double what they just gave. All right, let's get into our talk with Father Brian Lager. After graduating from Benedictine College in Atchison, Father Brian served as a focus missionary and then entered seminary. He was ordained in 2012 and served in Salina, Plainville, Hayes, and now as the pastor of Sacred Heart Church in Colby. Man, you've been moved around a lot already.
Oh, and that's even missing one.
Oh, really? What's it missing?
After Salina was in Concordia.
Okay.
Concordia and Belleville and Cuba and Munden, and then Plainville and Stockton, and then here in Hayes in the campus center and St. Joe's. Colby is actually the first place I've been where I only have one parish.
Only have one. Okay. My goodness.
Because the next closest parish to me is 30 miles away.
Okay.
we're the only Catholic parish in the county. So.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, thank you for all of that. And maybe Bishop will let you stay for a little bit. I don't know. I'm not in,
well, we're open. I mean, announcements are made this weekend. I mean,
so we'll find out.
Yeah, one of my moves was the day. So we announce on Saturday evenings, and I found out the morning before the announcements where I was going one time.
Nice. Nice. That's the life of a priest. Okay,
it's just how all the pawns have to fall into place, and sometimes that's how it goes.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thanks for being with us, Father. We'll jump in then to as we're talking about "Come Follow Me," and you said, see that it would be appropriate to talk about it.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I don't know that they can pinpoint anything directly, but where do you think your calling started? To the priesthood, was it early in your life? Was it later? Or what are the kind of events that really made you start considering this?
Yeah, I think there's some very obvious ones, but it's just like any vocation. I feel like it's gradual over time. Now, there's some people that can pinpoint. It was this moment where I knew I was called to be a priest, and some people are just like, I never had the revelation of well, I know I was supposed to be, and it's just like. They say yes, and they just continue saying yes, and they continue saying yes. And God never says no, or the seminary never says no, or the diocese never says no until they get ordained, and they're happily ordained, And so everybody's got a little bit different vocation story, and some people don't have the big shining moment. And
sure,
I think mine has, the moment, but it also has just kind of gradual over time. And so whenever I tell my story, mine always begins in kindergarten. Begins in kindergarten, mostly at kindergarten graduation. At our kindergarten graduation, so however old kids are in kindergarten, 5 years old,
5,
6 years
6.
old,
Yep.
something like that. I was old, so I was probably 6. So we had to draw a picture of what we wanted to be when we grew up. And so, my one friend was drawing, they wanted to be a doctor when they grew up, which they became a doctor, which was kind of funny. Another one, was wanted to be a police officer. Another one wanted to be a firefighter. And that's what I began drawing was, I was like, I want to be a firefighter when I grew up. But I looked over, saw my neighbor was drawing that they wanted to be a firefighter. And so I turned my sheet over and I was like, well, I don't want to be the same thing as them. Nothing against them.
I'm not a follower.
That's right. I don't want to follow them. And so for whatever reason, I have no idea why. I don't remember why, but I actually drew a picture of me being a priest. And so we had kindergarten graduation. We all stand up on the stage. We get up there and we go to the microphone. We read what we want to be when we grow up. And I hold my picture up and I get up there and I say, I want to be a priest when I grow up. And so for me, that's where it began. I mean, I can remember that. And well, there's video of it too, but it was the 80s, so it was VHS, and it's very grainy now, but that's where it began for me, and it wasn't like my parents just held me to that.
Sure.
It wasn't something that I even held myself to it. I'll be honest, I probably didn't ever think about it again until probably high school, when it was like, well, now I have to make a decision what I'm going to do after high school. And so I have an uncle that's a priest, Father John Lager. He's my dad's twin brother. And so in high school, went on a vocation retreat with him. He's a Capuchin Franciscan out in Denver. So he took us up to Mother Cabrini Shrine, and we had a couple days of retreat to pray about our vocations. And then we went to Steubenville Conference out in Denver back in 1998 or whatever that was.
Okay.
I mean, it was very early on for these Steubenville conferences.
Yeah.
And so that was probably the next time I thought about it, but I don't think I actually thought about it. I went because it was getting off the farm, which we didn't get to do very often. Whenever you grew up on a dairy farm, you're always looking for ways to get off the farm to not have to milk cows. And so I went, and there's my brother went with me, and a couple other guys that Father John had, and probably for the first time kind of actually gave real thought to it. But it wasn't something that I was just like, I didn't feel like it was something I was like, no, I'm definitely doing this.
Yeah.
Is more like is more of an opportunity to get away from home.
Gotcha.
Is what it was. And so there was not a real thought about it then. But I know that in the back of my parents' heads, they were still, what did Brian say? When he was in kindergarten, like, and still my parents never said, well, you're going to be a priest, so you have to go do this.
Yeah.
And I look back and like, if I would have went to the seminary right out of high school, it'd have been very bad. I mean, my knowledge of the Catholic faith back then was so limited.
Okay.
My knowledge of our church and our diocese was so limited. I think I knew 2 priests growing up, maybe 3, not 2 by the time I graduated high school. I had 2 priests.
Okay.
That I can remember. One priest baptized me. The next priest was there for my first communion, my first confession. And then another priest there was for my confirmation, and then when I graduated. And so I mean, I knew 2 priests. Wasn't really involved in diocesan things. There wasn't a lot of diocesan things happening back then, and so it was just very limited. It had been very bad if I went to seminary back then. Just looking back, so yeah, I chose to go to Benedictine College, and I went to Benedictine College because being in high school, like playing football, I liked football. I went on a football scholarship.
Okay.
Benedictine College was much less expensive back then than it is now. But and so I got a good enough scholarship that I was paying to go to Benedictine. I was paying what I would have paid at a public university.
Oh, nice.
So it was a good deal. And Benedictine was the only college campus I visited, the only one, because when I went for my campus visit, we drove onto campus. I knew immediately that I was going to go there. I don't know what it was, but it was just one of those things, just like, this is it. Hadn't even walked on the campus yet, hadn't taken a tour. We pulled on the campus. Mom and I went for the visit. We pulled on the campus, and I just knew. I was like, this is the place. I know this is going to be it.
Fantastic.
And Benedictine became one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
That is wonderful.
So
also want to break in and say another thing that is wonderful. couple things. I want to congratulate Mary Schlick as our trivia winner. She's from Colby, and she also pledged $300. So that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so very much, Mary. And Chuck and Alicia Wilkins from Goodland, they pledged $1,000. So here in just, the 5-10 minutes that Father's been talking, that turns into $2,600 with those matching funds that we have. That is awesome. I would love if we could use up all those matching funds today. So show us how much you appreciate what Christ is doing in our diocese, and how much that you guys appreciate Father Brian Lager. So we'll base it off of that. How much people
donations are going to cease, Cody. Don't say that.
I'm just kidding. Please don't stop. Oh, that is awesome. So thank you, Mary. Thank you, Chuck and Alicia. That is wonderful. Thank you for being on mission with us, and helping us to spread the gospel message out there. You are listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Spring Care-a-thon. Come follow me, 785-621-4110 for your pledges. We are talking with Father Brian Lager about his journey into the priesthood and how God called him. So Father, we left when you were talking about going to Benedictine.
Right.
It's something that we haven't really discussed. And I know this is really big in any discernment process, is those around you. So we haven't quite got to, you saying, hey, I'm going to go to seminary yet.
I still wasn't really interested in it yet.
So let's hear more about then your time at Benedictine and what kind of leads up to it.
So I went to Benedictine on a football scholarship, and being on the football team brought with it a lot of things. Number one, leaving home, being on my own.
Yeah.
Growing up in the family that I did, I was ready to make my own decisions and do what I wanted to do, and not be controlled by my parents, as most kids do when they go to college.
Do that, yeah.
Right. So I did. So I kind of went to college and kind of lived a bit of a party life for a while. But also realized very quickly I didn't like waking up 6 the next morning.
Yeah.
So it was a very conscious decision. Like, this is dumb. What am I doing? I hate this. And so that lifestyle ended fairly quickly. It didn't last for very long. It honestly wasn't enjoyable. It wasn't something that I found. There was no true friendship in that.
Yeah.
And it was just going out and seeing people doing the same things every weekend. And doing dumb things, and then going to a party, and then as the cops come and break it up because of noise or whatever, then running to another party somewhere. It's just like, it's a constant and it just wasn't enjoyable. And so in the spring of my freshman year, I made the decision that I was going to transfer out of Benedictine for my major. Because going into Benedictine, I had the plan that I wasn't going to be there the whole time. I was going to go play a couple years of football, and then move on and go to K-State and major in milling science.
Okay.
So in my spring semester of my freshman year, I made that decision. And so it was, I think the decision was made when spring football came around, and I learned how much running there was. I was like, if I'm not going to be here next year, I'm not going to do that. So I the stories were that there's always trash cans in the corner for people to puke. That's how much they did a lot of conditioning for spring football, which was good. It's needed to be done. But the first morning that my roommate went to spring football practice, he came back and told me how awful it was, and I was like, glad I made the decision. and so even in my freshman year, I got early on in the fall, there was Focus was offering Bible studies, and I didn't really know what Focus was yet, but I saw Bible studies as being offered on Wednesday night, and I was just like, well, I had CCD growing up on Wednesday nights. I might as well do something.
Okay.
That was my reasoning. It wasn't like a super great desire of oh yeah, this is gonna be really, really exciting. It was, well, I did this throughout growing up, I might as well continue doing it.
Amazing how God can work with you.
I know. And so I met met Matt McCartney, who is my Bible study leader. He had an apartment off campus, and so we would go over to his place for Bible study. And oftentimes, I was the only one that showed up for Bible study, and so we just had a lot of just one-on-one talks. It was Matt McCartney who taught me to drink coffee. I blame him. It was him that I smoked my first cigar. I blame him. That didn't last very long either. But
because it tastes terrible.
They really do. The next morning, it's just like for days your mouth is awful. But it was just having a friendship with someone that was not, that actually became more real than what the kind of the lifestyle of those that I went out with on the weekends.
Okay.
And so he started inviting me to things that were not that. So we would go ice skating in Kansas City, or we would go to a movie, or we would just play cards, or it was something that wasn't the other thing,
Yeah.
which I realized very quickly wasn't what I liked anyway. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't enjoyable. And so spending time with him, and then obviously we're doing Bible study as well. And so learning simple things, but also, you're a Benedictine, you're required to take an introduction to theology class, which I took freshman year, and I had Dr. Edward Sree.
Oh, wow. How fantastic.
Right. And I mean, he had only been there a couple years. And so this is very early on in his career also. And when he came, kind of focus came with him. And just, it was sitting in his class one day, we were going through salvation history, and kind of I literally remember having this image where, you know how in cartoons, how the light bulb goes on when somebody gets an idea. That's what it felt like.
Okay.
It's just like the light bulb went on, and everything he was saying about salvation history, about the church, how it all comes together, it just all made sense.
Awesome.
And the thought that I had was, holy cow, my parents weren't wrong. They didn't always give me all the answers. But it's just like, this is why my parents did what they did. They may not have known all the answers that I was getting.
Yeah.
But this is why they did what they did. This is why they raised me the way that they did. And it was kind of that light bulb moment that was just like, this actually means something. This is legit. This is real. And I loved it. I loved learning it. It was just seeing all the symbolism and seeing how all these things tied together, seeing how the Old Testament ties in the New, and how the New Testament reveals the Old, and seeing all this play out and how we live it out in our life, just became so incredibly amazing that I began to really fall in love with the faith.
Yeah.
It wasn't just something I did on Sundays. It wasn't just something going to a Bible study just because that's what I grew up doing. It began to be something that I was just like studying and actually taking on for myself, and actually learning and beginning to love. And so that's where I began to change, began taking on the faith for myself, and began to actually, then there was a 24-hour adoration at chapel that was in the parish church that a lot of students would take hours for. I never took an hour, but it's just being able to stop in every so often and being able to do those things. So
that is fantastic.
Yeah.
You are listening to Father Brian Lager speak on Divine Mercy Radio's Spring Care-a-thon. Come follow me. We're talking about his vocation story, which is great. I love hearing about everybody's vocation story, however they came to understand what God is calling them to in their lives. But it's always good to hear these stories to help us understand how other people have come to it, and to be reminded too that Christ calls us in all kinds of different ways. And it's, as Father, you were saying, it's not always just the light bulb.
No.
The light bulb did finally come on for you, but sometimes it's even in just the normal mundane things we're doing, like, well, whatever. Not doing anything else that Christ can drag us along. Yeah, I'll just go to Bible study. Looking back, how funny is that? Well, I'm not doing anything else. I guess I'll go to a Bible
That's
study.
pretty much what it was.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
You're listening to Divine Mercy Radio. Come follow me as our spring Care-a-thon. We have that total goal of $125,000. We still do have some matching funds. Let's see if we can get those used up by the end of the day. Call 785-621-4110 with your pledge. Help us to continue our mission. And I will get to a second trivia question here in a little bit, but I want to get back with Father Brian Lager talking about getting ready to maybe understand the call to the priesthood and start answering that. So, Father, where do we go
Sure.
from here in your story?
So when I transferred in the fall of my semester year to K-State, I lived with a group of Catholics, and so I think because it was kind of like starting over, I kind of fell back into some of the old ways, just trying to find a niche, and trying to find the friends. And luckily, there was enough Catholics that didn't do that I just kind of fell in line with them. So I was going to study milling science at K-State, but I realized very quickly in my calculus class, Calc 1 was always known as the weed out class at K-State.
Okay.
So it was a very difficult class. And the college kind of knew it, and most of the majors would put you in it, and if you can't do it, then they weed you out.
Okay,
So that because for my major, I think I was gonna have to take, was it up to Calc 3? I can't remember. Anyway, I got a 33 on my first test, and the little bit of math I could do, I was like, I can't bring this grade up, and if I'm gonna have to have all this math, and then I had to have all this chemistry too, which I did fine in chemistry with all the experiments and stuff, but I couldn't do the math.
Okay.
And so knowing I was gonna have to do all this math, I realized, this major probably isn't for me. I loved all the other stuff about it. I loved it when we actually got to in the lab, when we actually milled our own flour, and we could take it home and we could bake with it. I love that. That was awesome. But I realized very early on when I was at K-State that I wasn't going to stay there. And so spring semester I transferred back to Benedictine, and that was enough time to just break away completely from the old lifestyle, and all the people that I had partied with in my freshman year at Benedictine. It's very clear that they weren't friends because they weren't really around, and they weren't really excited to see me back, and they didn't really care. And so I realized that it was kind of the Bible study and that group of friends that I tended towards. And so when I got back to Benedictine, that's where I kind of spent more of my time. And so I had to choose a major at that point. So I chose, they didn't have theology at the time, it was religious studies, but it's mostly just all Catholic studies. And so I chose that because I loved my theology classes when I was at Benedictine the time before. And so that's what I chose. And that kind of took me through college. And I was still, being with those friends that I was with through Focus and the Bible study, there was not a constant, but there was always the question of, what is your vocation, discerning your vocation, what's life look like after college. It was also questions of what's it look like to be a man. What's it look like to be a Catholic? What's it look like to be a Catholic man? And so just constant conversations. I would say at Benedictine, I learned more outside the classroom than I did in the classroom. Wow. Yeah, I got head knowledge in the classroom, but it was the practical applications that were learned outside the classroom, in the conversations, in the way that we shared life together, in our Bible studies, just talking about that stuff. That's where I became who I am today. Wow. And if it wasn't for Benedictine, I go back to the fact, if I would have went to seminary right out of high school, I would not be the priest I am today. And part of that's because of Benedictine and the things I learned at Benedictine, just the understanding of who we are as Catholics, what we believe as Catholics, how we talk about that as Catholics, how we share that with others as Catholics, and how we bring others to know the faith. And that was all learned there. And I wasn't the best student. I probably could have got better grades, but I really enjoyed just hanging out with people and learning in that way. And that's where the education at Benedictine is not just in the classroom. Yeah, it's your friendships, it's the conversations you have. The beautiful thing is, like Dr. Sri was part of our Bible studies. Whenever we had Bible study gatherings with all of Focus, a lot of times they were at Dr. Sri's house. And so there is mentorships happening with certain people, like Dr. Swafford, who's a Benedictine. Like Dr. Sri mentored him to be where he is today. That's awesome. And so there's people like that Dr. Sri is very close to, that mentored them to where they are today. I mean, I remember at one point, Dr. Sri, he had married, had I think one kid, maybe two, and they were planting grass. So there's the Focus missionary said, "Hey, you want to come help us?" We went and planted his grass one day.
Oh, nice.
so I mean, there was, but all of that was part of our formation
Yeah.
All of it was part of our learning. It was all education because, as you know, education is not just educating information. It's not just information in the brain. It's a literal formation of the mind for the love of learning, and for the formation of the soul to the truth. Right.
Yeah,
that's what education really is. And so that's what we're always seeking. Benedictine was that for me. And I think it is for most people that go there, if you allow that to happen. Yeah. So it was the talking about what is God calling us to. And so in my probably junior year, just serious conversations about what does life look like after college? What is God calling us to? And so real thought about, am I called to be a priest? And having the group of friends that I was with, the men that I surrounded myself with, there was a lot of talk about that. Am I called to be a priest? And so interestingly enough, in my group of friends from college, I think I'm the only priest.
Oh, really? Okay.
The rest of them all married and doing other amazing things. But I ended up being the only priest out of all of it. And so just the thought about that. And then even in senior years, like now it's like, oh shoot, what am I going to do after college? now I have to actually make a decision.
Hit another crossroad here.
And at that time, just remembering back, it still wasn't right for me to go to seminary.
Okay.
And once again, I look back and like, if I would have went to seminary right out of college, I still wouldn't be the priest that I am today. And so it was God putting me towards Focus, which I think if I applied for Focus today, they wouldn't hire me. but they hired me back then. They were desperate. And once again, it was the formation that I received for Focus. And once again, forming me to not just have a faith of where we just believe it, but having a missionary faith, a faith of the fact that you're not meant to keep it to yourself, right? And it kind of reminds me of the gospel we had this last Sunday, where the two branches, right? We're meant to remain on the vine, but we're not meant to be fruitless. We're meant to produce fruit. If we don't produce fruit, it's not good. Worse, you get thrown in the fire. And so that's what Focus taught me was how to produce fruit and how to live my faith in a way that's not just holding on to information, but actually giving it away, and being able to talk about that in a manner that's going to hopefully be evangelistic, that people can understand and come into the faith. So I applied for Focus, and they accepted me somehow, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful gift for me.
Wonderful. We'll get right back to your story. Going to break in here and do our second question of the hour. So if you think you know this question, or if you think you know the answer to this question, call 785-621-4110. We'll get you entered into that drawing for that $50 gift certificate, which we draw at 6 o'clock every day. And it is to Messenger Traditional Catholic Books and Gifts here in Hayes. Jerome and Angela Schmeidler, wonderful people. All right, here we go. Second question, 785-621-4110. Who was the last pope to have attended Vatican II in person? Was it A, Pope John Paul II, B, Pope Francis, C, Pope Benedict XVI, or D, Pope John Paul I? It's a good thing that I know Roman numerals, because at least those ones, because he wrote it with Roman numerals. Who was the last pope to have attended Vatican II in person? Is it A, Pope John Paul II, B, Pope Francis, C, Pope Benedict XVI, or D, Pope John Paul I? Call in to 785-621-4110 with your answer or your pledge or both. That was actually...
Did anybody answer the first one? First trivia question?
Yes, I think so. Okay. Oh, maybe not. We never did get a let's see.
Yeah, we still...
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. I announced it. That was Mary Schlick.
Oh, that's right.
Yep. Yeah. So thank you. You I'm sorry. I have to look back through my notes. And be
well, like, I know that she gave a donation. I guess I wasn't listening to when you said that she gave the answer to.
Oh, but so thank you. Good. But Michael actually writes these questions.
Oh, well,
So.
he's gonna have to come up with some different ones. I'm joking. I'm joking.
All right, you are listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Spring Care-a-thon. Come follow me, and I'm having a great time here with Father Brian Lager. We're talking about his vocation story, and made it heard some wonderful things, made it a good long way into your journey into focus,
Right.
how focus really kind of prepared you to be able to live out what you were learning,
Right.
not just head knowledge.
Right.
So where do we go from there?
Yeah. So when you're in college, you're constantly looking for a spouse, right? Who's going to be someone that I can live the rest of my life with and live Catholic faith with. When did you become a Catholic? Was it after
18
college?
years ago. Yes, it was
During college or after?
After. It was right about 3 months after I got married.
Okay. And so, but college, most people are looking for a spouse, right? And so I was too. And so when we got into Focus, there was a strict dating fast for the first year where you weren't allowed to date anyone. And they even encouraged couples that were dating to take some time apart, to not talk every day, and even to consider breaking up for the year.
Wow.
And I mean, it was very strict back then. I think it's not as strict as it used to be. But it was, and there was a tremendous freedom in that, knowing that being around these beautiful women who love the faith, within Focus during the Focus training. So we had Focus training that was 5 or 6 weeks long up in Madison, Wisconsin. Back then there was like 80 missionaries was it for Focus. Now there's like, I don't know, 1,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's 80 of us, and we went to the old seminary in Madison, Wisconsin. That's where our training was, and so there's beautiful women, but them and you all know that, you know, it's not even something to be seeking, right?
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to kind of be formed in a manner that they can be real women, we can be real men, and have friendships of men and women that are not constantly seeking a relationship of any sort, right?
How nice is that too?
It was extremely freeing.
That has to be so freeing.
It was.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's not that tension there.
You're exactly right.
Wow.
Not constantly thinking about how do I impress this person? How do I not say something wrong so that then they don't like me? Like that, there's that constant.
Yeah.
I think I mean, I just think about that in college, how there's that constant.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't say this, can't say that. And
yeah,
I mean, maybe there should be that. There's got to be that filter somewhere. But it wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was just literally just, you could just be you.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. It was amazing. And so my whole first year in Focus, that's what it was, being able to form friendships with men and women that didn't have that tension of, is this a possible spouse, you know?
Yeah.
And so it actually freed you up to pray. You know, it was the year of, well, I've got 2 years in Focus, so vocation is not even really an option of anything to pray about right now. It was literally just focusing on, okay, what does my relationship with Jesus Christ look like? And so within Focus, we were required to pray a holy hour every day in front of the Blessed Sacrament, if we could. Find a church, get there, and then go to daily Mass every day. And when you do that enough, it changes you.
Yeah.
You can't be not changed. You will. That was a double negative.
Yeah,
you will be changed.
Yeah. No, I got you.
You will be changed. You will be transformed in a good way, because it's not that God ever kicks the door of our hearts in, but He knocks. And this is my home parish in Angeles. They just renovated, and they restored some paintings that were put on the walls in 1940 something, and then and then in the 70s they paneled over them. And so there's just wood paneling all over the back walls, and they took the paneling off when they started this to see if the paintings were still there, and they were, but they had ruined them because they had painted some, or put some strips of wood over it to nail the wood paneling to. So when they saw that they were there, the parish said, well, let's put new ones back up. And so they have this company come out, the same ones that are doing Immaculate Heart of Mary right now.
Okay.
Conrad Schmidt, and they repainted them, and it's beautiful. Two beautiful, the Christ the Sower and Christ knocking on the door. And so that's the image I always have in my mind is the picture from Angeles, Christ knocking on the door. And remember, the door never has an outdoor
Yeah, I've seen that
handle.
one. Yep.
Because Christ doesn't force his way in.
Yeah.
Never will. But if you put yourself in the place before the Blessed Sacrament, you put yourself before Christ, and receive him faithfully in the state of grace, in Mass, and then you spend an hour with him every single day, it's impossible for you to keep him out.
Yeah.
Because your heart is just transformed, and that's what began to happen. I think it happens to every Focus missionary, because some people that come into Focus, at least back then, were pretty rough. I remember a guy that was going into Focus, and I remember at the end of my freshman year seeing him party, and I was like, that guy's going to be a Focus missionary. And then seeing what Focus did to him, and not Focus, seeing what the Lord did to him,
Yeah.
over the next couple of years, was like, that's incredible. The Lord changed this man's heart, and really transformed him.
That's fantastic.
So that's the same thing for all of us. If we put ourselves in the place to be transformed by God, he will.
Yeah.
If we allow that to happen. If we don't allow that to happen, it won't happen.
Yep.
It just won't happen. God is not going to kick down the door and force his way in.
Yeah.
He's a gentleman. He's not going to take advantage of us. So that's what my first year in Focus was. And so I was at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln for my first year. It was an incredible year. There's 4 missionaries there at the time. And there was so many people involved in Bible studies. And I had been involved in Bible study at college. My male teammate, was not. And so I was kind of seen as the senior male. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I'd never led a Bible study before. It was terrible. The one I did lead in college, we spent more time not going to Bible study than we did going to Bible study. So actually I had a guy leave my Bible study because we didn't study the Bible enough.
It's kind of like my first couple of years of teaching. I look back and I'm like, yeah, I wish I could redo those too.
Right, exactly. So at University of Nebraska, I mean, it was we had students involved. It was also a rough year. We had some situations where we had to cut some students because when you get involved in Focus, there's expectations.
Yeah.
And it was called Living the Big Three, not poverty, chastity, obedience, but it was sobriety, chastity, and excellence.
Oh, wow.
And so if you're a student leader, same things are expected. And so we had some students that were not living that, and so we had to kind of make some cuts, and so we trimmed down. We had to prune the program a little bit, and that was hard. It was a rough year dealing with that. We made it through, and then I think the year after me, I think they had 5 or 6 missionaries after that, and the program blew up after that. But I mean, we had the year where we had to endure the difficulties.
Yeah.
And that's fine. The second year in Focus, I decided to ask to be moved. And so I was moved to Troy University in Troy, Alabama. Used to be Troy State. It's now Troy University. So going from the University of Nebraska, where there's tons of kids involved, very Catholic community, very Catholic environment, going to Troy, Alabama, where the entire state, I think it's 3% Catholic. Oh, wow. And I think there's 5,000 students on campus, where there's 25 to 30,000 at the University of Nebraska. And then like a third of those students in Nebraska are Catholic. So you think there's about 5,000 Catholics-ish at the University of Nebraska, to having 5,000 students total on campus, where it's a 3% Catholic population in the entire state. So we had a few students involved.
Yeah.
You know, if each of us had one in a 2 or 3 in our Bible study, we were happy. So it lended itself for a lot more time for prayer.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have a Newman Center at Troy. We had the local parish church. And so we kind of worked out of there. And that allowed for me to spend more time in front of the Blessed Sacrament. One of my favorite things to do, at least back then, I don't do it as much anymore, is just to go in the church when it's dark, and the red candle, the presence candle. Yeah. You can't necessarily see the tabernacle, but you can see the camel. So you know he's there.
Yeah.
You know he's near. And I spent a lot of time in the church with the red candle burning, knowing his presence. Just in frustration with being in Alabama, being far away from friends, requesting to leave Nebraska, but also being able to discern my vocation. And so, since I was no longer on the dating fast, there was some interest of some people I wanted to date and potentially marry, but I picked up 2 books that year. In the fall, I picked up the book, the biography of St. John Vianney, and I'd never read it before, and I was like, well, I should discern my vocation, so I'll read this book. He was a parish priest. I didn't know anything else about John Vianney, St. John Vianney, except for the fact that he was a parish priest. And I read it in a very short amount of time, quicker than I read most books. And I got done, and I closed the book, and I said, God is calling me to be a priest.
Wow. How was that?
and so it was, yeah. So the, kind of the interest of people that I potentially was going to be marrying, that I thought I'd marry, that all kind of ended. And so I read the book, finished it, and I was like, holy cow. And I don't remember if it was right after I ended the book or if it was later, but I kind of had this, God puts images on your heart sometimes, right, or in your mind. Mm-hmm. And so the image that I had was walking down a hallway. There's a white hallway, and as I was walking down the hallway, doors on every side, and they're all closing. There's only one door open. There's one at the end of the hallway, and it was at the end of the hallway that it was very clearly that was the priesthood. A lot of people discern, I should go to seminary and figure this out. For me, it was, I know that I'm called to be a priest.
Okay.
It was that day that I was like, when I changed all of my thought processes and everything, I was like, no, God's calling me to be a priest. And so that was, oh gosh, that was early September, shortly after we got there, because I came home for my brother's wedding, my older brother's wedding in Wichita. And while I was home, I picked up an application. His wedding was on September 24th. So it was like the week before that. So you need to break in and do your thing
really quickly. Sorry, I was just enjoying your discussion here. But you are correct. I wanted to remind everybody you're listening to Divine Mercy Radio, and we have our spring Care-a-thon going on, and it is titled "Come Follow Me." So the call of Christ. How are we following Christ? I want to congratulate my mother-in-law, Teresa Flax, wonderful lady. She is the trivia winner. It was who was the last pope to have attended Vatican II in person, and the correct answer there was Pope Benedict the 16th. So nice job, Teresa, and thank you so much for your wonderful example in my own life. And I also want to pass on to Father Brian that Shirley Dinkle says hello.
Oh, Shirley, of course.
And she says, thank you for being a wonderful pastor. So thank you, Shirley, for the kind words for Father Brian here. And we want to remind everybody that as we are in our spring Care-a-thon here, the way that you can give is to call 785-621-4110, or you can go to dvmercy.com and donate online. We still do have those matching funds so that your donation gets doubled immediately. Let's use those up by the end of the day. 785-621-4110. We're talking with Father Brian Lager about how he came to follow Christ in his own life. Had a great discussion so far. Unfortunately, we only have about 10 minutes left. So we got to try to fit in as much as you want.
Oh, the rest is short.
Okay. All right. So now you got 60 seconds, and then you're going to leave me hanging.
That's right. That's right. Probably. Yeah, Cody, fill in the other 9 minutes.
Great.
All right. Great.
No, so you were up to really having that light bulb definitely come on.
Picking up, so I came home from my brother's wedding and picked up an application. Father Keith Weber was the vocations director at the time. And actually what happened in that year was there was 2 seminarians that were killed in a car accident at Mundelein Seminary in that year. And one of them was a classmate from Benedictine. So I came back from my brother's wedding, but I came back a little early to go to his funeral. And it was a massive funeral. But on my way home, or on the way to the wedding, I went through Manhattan and picked up an application, and went to my brother's wedding. And after my brother's wedding, my dad went home before the rest of us. When you have a dairy, you have to go home and milk cows. So Dad went home before us all, and had we got home, we see Dad in the back of the barn, which he's usually is cleaning out the back, and and we get home and start unpacking, and we kind of look out and we see that like the tractor hasn't moved, and we're kind of looking for Dad, and we see that he's kind of down on the ground, and Dad's back has kind of spasmed and it kind of went out, and he had been there for several hours.
Oh my.
And so I ended up staying home an extra week to help him before, so he could recover and get back to being able to do what he could always do. So at the end of my time, I was kind of getting ready to go back to Alabama. I just kind of was walking out the door, and I kind of just, Mom's sitting over on the couch, and I just said, as I'm walking out the door, by the way, I'm applying for seminary.
How boy-esque is
All right,
that? Because
right.
girls went da, 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 and a boy, oh, by the way. Anything new, Brian?
Oh yeah, just applying for seminary. No big deal, you know.
That's great.
And so you know, it wasn't and my mom's reaction wasn't it was about time. But you know, just talking to them later, I mean, they kind of always had an idea that might be the case.
Yeah.
Ever since kindergarten and beyond. But I didn't eventually fill out the application till Thanksgiving break. And the greatest thing about the application of seminary, and I think even if a guy's thinking about the seminary, I think if he just did this, it'd be helpful. And even people that I've done spiritual direction with, I think this is important. Super helpful to me anyway. Was part of the application is writing your autobiography, and the question is, from your earliest memory, where can you recall God in your life, and how He's been calling you to the priesthood, and where you think He's been calling you. That was the most helpful thing, because I could go. That's when I could go all the way back to kindergarten and start pointing out, this is where. Yeah. And I could go back in the points of my life where God was protecting me from doing stupid things.
Yeah.
That would have hurt me as a priest, or times in my life when I think of one time that I stayed home sick from school, but it wasn't like so sick I couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah.
I was sick enough not to go to school. And so by the afternoon, Dad said, "Hey, let's go move equipment." It was the fall Milo harvest, and Dad sent me off to go get the truck, and he stayed with the combine. He was kind of cleaning out the old Milo in the bin, and he did something he shouldn't have. But welcome to farm life. You do a lot of things you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
But he turned the combine real slow and turned on the unloading auger in the combine, and he went in the grain bin and was kicking the stuck Mile down into the auger to get it out, and he kicked it down, and his foot got caught, and the auger was slowly pulling him in.
Oh,
and I see out the back of the window, because I had to take the pickup to go get the truck. I see him, waving his arms over his head, and I'm like, is he like telling me to go? Like, I was far enough away, I didn't know what the heck he wanted. And so then it is one of those God moments again. It's just like, oh crap, something's going on. So I turn around, spin around, and see what has happened. But it's just like things like that. Like you can look back in your life and you're just like, if I wouldn't have been there that day, who knows how long he might have, his whole leg might have come off or something,
No kidding.
But just little things like that, when you actually sit down and think about where God has been active in your life. And so so filling out the application was super helpful. So I got accepted by the diocese. And then we had to figure out where I was going to go to seminary. And this is another crazy story. When I was in college, I taught Totus Tuus out in Denver for a summer, in the summer of 2002. And I was only there's one seminarian that taught that summer, and I was on his team.
Okay.
It's just how it worked out. And so when we were passing, he would stop and get his mail at the seminary every once in a while. And so I saw this chapel at seminary out in Denver for the first time. If you've never been to the chapel, well, most people haven't, but the chapel in Denver for the seminary is extraordinary. The architect that built it calls it his masterpiece of his entire life. And absolutely extraordinary. And so as we had gone there, I jokingly said while I was there, this was 2002, I said, if I ever go to seminary, this is the only place I'll ever go. Wow. And interestingly enough, Bishop Coakley became our bishop 2004, 2005, something like that. And it must have been 2004, because then he sent Father Gale and Father Peter to go to seminary in Denver in 2005. And then when I applied for seminary in 2005, they told me I was going to go to Denver.
Oh, fantastic.
And I was like, hilarious, God, thanks a lot. And so yeah, I applied to, so when you apply to seminary, you have to apply to the diocese, and then you have to apply to the seminary you're going to go to.
Okay.
I applied to Denver. I went out to do my interview on like August 11th, 10th or 11th, and I was accepted on August 12th, and then I showed up to seminary on like August 28th or something like that year.
Well, that's a quick turnaround.
It was. I mean, I had already been
Yeah.
accepted by the diocese, but it was the only date that worked for me to actually apply to the seminary and go and do my interview.
Okay.
I think it's because I was in Troy. I just couldn't get back to do it.
Okay.
So I got accepted, and going to Denver was amazing. I loved seminary in Denver. If you'd have asked me that while I was in seminary, I told you I hated seminary, which ultimately I
It's pretty much like kids in high school.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, I don't think I'd go back and say I liked high school still today, but
Well, me neither. But
but looking back, seminary was a great place for me. A lot of good men that came out of that seminary while I was there. And the formation that I received there was incredible. But one kind of final story as we wrap up here.
Okay.
You know, we talk about I talk about not everything's huge moments. But for me, you know, reading the St. John Vianney book, kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And then it was actually after our first year of seminary, after the spirituality year, we do what's called a 30-day silent retreat, or the long retreat of St. Ignatius of Loyola, however you want to talk about it. It ends up being 30 days. You pray for, there's 5 1-hour meditations, 4 or 5 1-hour meditations that you do every day on that retreat. So it's not like you're just sitting around.
Yeah.
But for me, is the worst 30 days of my life. Because it's pretty silent. I don't really have an active imagination. But there is one meditation, and it was the meditation on Christ's birth. That was so incredible for me, and it only lasted about 2 minutes, that it sustained me for the whole 30 days. And that was like the only good, what I would call a good meditation I had that entire month.
Wow.
And it was so powerful that it sustained me throughout those 30 days. But it was also extremely confirming in my vocation, that once again, I knew on that day that I was called to be a priest.
That's awesome.
And so there's just little moments in my entire life that led me to know that I was called to be a priest. And then even in seminary, God continued to confirm me in that. And that's not the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Some people, like I said, it's just as long as you say yes, God, the seminary, and the diocese doesn't say no, and so you just continue. And if you, at some point in that, you realize that you're not called, God, the seminary, the diocese, or yourself in your prayer, realize it's not for you.
Yeah.
For me, it was different, and that's not the same for everybody. So, but I'm grateful for my vocation. I don't think there's any other life I could have ever lived. You can ask my parishioners. I'm not perfect. We all know that.
Ask my kids.
But I love being a priest. I love the church, and I want to do whatever the church asks of me. So.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Father. I really appreciate your time here with us today.
Yeah.
I want to thank really quickly Gene and Teresa Flax. They gave $750, and Chris and Nicole Corsair of Hayes donated $1,000. So those both get doubled.
Nice.
Way to use up those funds. Father, would you leave us with your priestly blessing, please?
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
And the Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks,
you,
Cody.
Father.
Appreciate it.
You are listening to Divine Mercy Radio Spring Care-a-thon. Come follow me. Once again, want to thank Gene and Teresa Flax and Chris and Nicole Corsair for helping us to use up those funds and get to our total goal of $125,000. You're listening to 101.7 KJDM, Lindsborg and Salina, 105.7 KMDG Hayes, 88.1 KRTT Great Bend, 88.1 KVDM Hayes, and 89.1 KGOH Colby. We will be back on at the noon hour after lunch. So we will see you back then. Thank you for listening.